Anxiety is robbing millions of people of their peace right now, and there's a saint who figured out the antidote over a century ago. What you're about to hear could completely change the way you face every single day. We live in an age that has never been more connected and never been more anxious. Notifications firing every few minutes. News cycles designed to trigger fear. Social media feeds engineered to make you feel like you're falling behind. The pressure is relentless, and most of the advice out there about dealing with it is shallow at best. Breathe deeply. Think positive. Disconnect for a weekend. None of it touches the root. None of it reaches the place where the real chaos lives, inside the soul. But here's what's remarkable. A man who lived in a small monastery in southern Italy, who never owned a smartphone, never scrolled through a feed, never had a calendar packed with back-to-back meetings, that man described your exact struggle and left behind a roadmap so precise, so grounded, that it reads less like spiritual advice from the past and more like a personal letter written directly to you in this moment. His name was Francesco Forgione. The world came to know him as Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. And what he understood about the human heart, about worry, about the relentless noise of an anxious mind, is something that no productivity app, no wellness coach, and no motivational speaker has been able to replicate. So that's exactly what we're doing in this video. We're going deep into the 5 rules of life that Padre Pio lived by and taught to thousands of people who came to him broken, overwhelmed, and desperate for something real. Not theories. Not vague inspiration. Practical, soul-level transformation that you can begin applying before this video is even over. Stay with me, because the further we go, the more specific and powerful this gets. Let's start with the foundation. Padre Pio didn't just talk about peace, he was peace. People who encountered him described an almost physical sensation when they were in his presence. A quieting. A stillness that didn't make sense given everything he was carrying. This was a man who bore the wounds of Christ on his body for 50 years. A man who was investigated, restricted, and at times persecuted by the very institution he dedicated his life to. A man who heard confessions for up to 18 hours a day, absorbing the weight of people's darkest sins and deepest griefs. And yet every witness, every document, every account agrees, he was not anxious. He was not tormented by uncertainty. He had found something that held him steady through it all. Those 5 rules were not abstract philosophy, they were the daily architecture of that stability. The first rule, and the one that anchors everything else, is morning offering. Padre Pio began every single day by consciously surrendering it. Not by planning it. Not by strategizing it. By offering it, his joys, his sufferings, his work, his interactions, all of it placed in the hands of God before a single obligation had been met or a single problem had arisen. Now think about how you begin your days. For most of us, the first thing we do is reach for a phone. We enter the day already reactive, already responding to someone else's agenda, already being pulled in 17 different directions before we've had a single quiet thought. The morning offering does the opposite. It reorients your entire inner posture. It reminds you, before the noise starts, who you are, where your strength comes from, and what actually matters. This is not passive. This is the most powerful thing you can do in the first 5 minutes of your day. It creates what you might call a spiritual center of gravity. And when the turbulence comes, and it will come, you return to that center instead of being swept away. The second rule flows directly from the first: examine your conscience each evening. Now, this might sound like something meant to produce guilt, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what Padre Pio was pointing toward. The evening examination is not about cataloging your failures in a way that tears you down. It's about honest, clear-eyed awareness. Where did I act out of fear today instead of love? Where did I let anxiety make my decisions? Where did I treat someone poorly because I was overwhelmed? The reason this matters for your anxiety is that unexamined guilt and unacknowledged sin create a constant low-level hum of spiritual unease. It's background noise that you can never quite identify but that exhausts you over time. The evening examination brings it into the light. You name it, you release it, and you go to sleep lighter. Day after day, this practice builds a kind of interior clarity that modern psychology spends years trying to achieve through therapy. That's not to diminish therapy, it has real value, but there is something uniquely powerful about bringing your daily life before God with honesty and trust, and leaving it there. The third rule is what Padre Pio called spiritual reading. At least 15 minutes every day, immersed in scripture, in the lives of the saints, in writings that nourish the soul rather than deplete it. Consider for a moment what the average person feeds their mind in a day. Hours of content designed to provoke emotional reactions. Algorithms that amplify outrage because outrage drives engagement. Information delivered at a speed and volume that the human nervous system was never designed to process. And then we wonder why we can't sleep. Why we feel vaguely unsettled even when nothing specific is wrong. You cannot feed your mind a steady diet of anxiety-producing content and then be surprised when anxiety is what grows there. Spiritual reading is not escapism. It's recalibration. It's giving your mind a completely different kind of food, wisdom that has been tested across centuries, truth that does not change with the news cycle, stories of human beings who faced suffering far greater than ours and found not just survival but genuine peace and even joy in the middle of it. 15 minutes. That's all Padre Pio asked. 15 minutes of feeding your soul something that actually nourishes it. Now we arrive at what is perhaps the most famous and most misunderstood thing Padre Pio ever said. Pray, hope, and don't worry. Those 4 words have been printed on prayer cards and coffee mugs and quoted in 1,000 different contexts. But in that casual familiarity, something essential has been lost. Let's recover it. Because what Padre Pio meant by those words was not a gentle suggestion. It was a complete reordering of the internal logic by which you approach your problems. Pray. Not as a last resort. Not as a complement to your own frantic problem solving. As the first response, the primary action, the thing you do before you do anything else. Prayer, in Padre Pio's understanding, was not presenting God with a wish list. It was placing yourself in conscious relationship with the one who holds all things. It was an act of radical trust that shifted your entire perspective on whatever crisis you were facing. The problem didn't change in the moment of prayer, but you changed. Your capacity to see clearly, to act wisely, to endure without being destroyed, all of that was transformed through genuine prayer. This is why Padre Pio spent hours in prayer every day. Not because he had nothing else to do, but because he understood that everything else he did depended on it. Hope. This is the word that most people rush past, and it's actually the hinge on which the entire teaching turns. Hope, in the Catholic spiritual tradition, is not wishful thinking. It is a theological virtue, a firm and certain expectation based not on circumstances but on the character and promises of God. What Padre Pio was saying is this: between your prayer and whatever outcome unfolds, there is a space. That space is where you live. And in that space, you are called not to spiral, not to catastrophize, not to run every worst-case scenario over and over in your mind, but to hold firm in the expectation that God is working, even when you cannot see it. Especially when you cannot see it. This is not passivity. This is not resignation. This is the most active and demanding thing a human being can do, to resist the gravitational pull of anxiety and choose, again and again, to stand in hope. Don't worry. And here's where the rubber meets the road, because this is the part that feels impossible. Don't worry. With everything happening? With the uncertainty, the bills, the relationships, the health, the world? And Padre Pio would look at you with complete seriousness and say, yes. Exactly then. Don't worry then. Because worry does not solve a single one of those problems. Worry is not preparation. Worry is not vigilance. Worry is your imagination rehearsing disaster, and every time you give it permission to run that rehearsal, you are spending real energy, real peace, real joy, paying a price for something that has not happened and may never happen. Padre Pio understood that worry is, at its core, a failure of trust. Not because trusting is easy, but because trusting is chosen. You can choose, in any given moment, to bring your fear to God and leave it there. That is not weakness. That is the hardest and most courageous thing a person can do. The fourth rule Padre Pio lived by was attendance at Holy Mass whenever possible. For those of you watching who are Catholic, you know what he meant. For those of you from other traditions, understand this. He was pointing toward the importance of regular, embodied participation in your community of faith. There is something irreplaceable about being physically present among others who are also seeking, also struggling, also choosing to orient themselves towards something greater than their circumstances. The isolation of modern life is one of the primary drivers of anxiety. We were not designed to carry our burdens alone. The fourth rule is a direct counter to that isolation, a weekly, or more frequent, reintegration into the body of people who hold one another accountable to hope. The fifth and final rule is perhaps the most quietly radical of all: devotion to Mary. Padre Pio's relationship with the Mother of Christ was tender, consistent, and deeply personal. He described her as a refuge, not in an abstract theological way, but in the way you describe a real relationship with someone who genuinely loves you and intercedes on your behalf. For the anxious soul, this matters because it offers what dry doctrine alone cannot: warmth, presence, the sense of being accompanied rather than navigated. Padre Pio prayed the rosary constantly. Not mechanically, but with the kind of focused attention that trained his heart to return, again and again, to trust. Every mystery of the rosary is a story of something impossible becoming possible through surrender to God's will. And in the repetition of those mysteries, day after day, something happens to the person praying them. The logic of anxiety begins to loosen its grip. A different logic takes its place, one grounded in love, in trust, in the lived evidence of divine faithfulness across centuries. Here is the truth that ties all 5 rules together. What Padre Pio was building, through the morning offering, the evening examination, the spiritual reading, the prayer and hope and refusal to worry, the participation in communal worship, the devotion to Mary, was not a temporary fix. He was constructing an interior life so solid, so deeply rooted, that external chaos simply could not reach the center of it. That is what you are being invited into right now. Not a quick technique. Not a spiritual hack. A complete reorientation of how you live, from the inside out. The transformation he called metanoia, a change of mind, a change of heart. That transformation is available to you. It does not require that your circumstances change first. It does not require that the anxiety disappear before you begin. You begin in the middle of the anxiety, with one small choice, and then another, and then another. The morning offering. The 15 minutes of spiritual reading. The prayer before the worry. The hope in the silence between asking and receiving. Small disciplines, practiced with consistency, compound into something extraordinary. Padre Pio is evidence of that. A man who by every external measure had every reason to be consumed by suffering and uncertainty, and who instead became one of the most luminous examples of human peace that the 20th century produced. His life is not a legend. It is a proof of concept. And his 5 rules are not relics. They are a living invitation. If this message reached something in you today, if something here stirred a hunger for more of this kind of depth, then the best thing you can do right now is subscribe to Living Hope. This channel exists precisely for moments like this one, to bring you content that goes beyond the surface, that takes your faith seriously, that gives you real tools for the real battles of real life. Hit subscribe, ring the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next, and share this video with someone you know who is carrying more weight than they should have to carry alone. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. None of us do. That's exactly why we're here.